The Super Floppy Cube has always intrigued me. Even though it's clearly a shape-shifting puzzle, its shape-shifting isn't easily explained like other cuboids such as the 2x4x6, and it also isn't the same in terms of geometry. What if I told you the Super Floppy Cube is actually just a bandaged 3x3 Rubik's Cube? This part, combined with this part, is a 3x3 core fused to two centerpieces. These four parts are regular 3x3 centers, these four are 3x3 edges, and these very small unstickered black parts, 8 of them, are also 3x3 edges. Finally, 3x3 corners are not present. Being bandaged, of course, there are plenty of moves that cannot be made on the Super Floppy Cube, such as this one. I thought it would be cool to create a fully unbandaged version, the ultimate floppy cube. Also, as an experiment, I'm going to try extending the CubeLab 10mm 3x3, as it's currently unknown whether or not it's suitable for 3D printed extension mods. So, let's see how it turns out. Alright, now that the cube is all back together, and thankfully it took a bit more force than I was expecting to put this back in, which means hopefully it'll stay in. But anyway, now that this is all back together, obviously since I only lubed this one corner, I have to work it around the entire puzzle, so let's do that real quick. Work it in there. Work it in there. Ignore the fact that that center cap is falling out. And then here. And then finally the two face turns. This is actually turning like a dream. Kind of surprised. And then the other face turn. Alright, this is actually kind of looking up. But anyway, overall this is honestly not looking that bad. Like, of course, the intended purpose of this whole ultra floppy thing is that I can make a 90-degree turn as such, and then turn it like that. And honestly, for that, this thing turns pretty well. Again, I'm just a little worried that hopefully it doesn't pop. And I don't even mean popping as in this. I'm not worried about this. I'll just super glue this back on. I'm talking about these edges. Hopefully these don't fall out. But that's why this is an experiment. So I'll glue this back in, and then sticker it up, and then we'll take it outside and see how it is. Alright, so it's been several days now since I was at the previous stage of this mod. I originally purchased 6 of these miniature 10mm 3x3s for modding purposes, and I've tried modding 3 of them so far. And I've come to the conclusion that for extension mods such as this, the 10mm Cube Labs 3x3 is unusable. This is for 2 reasons. First and foremost, if you look very closely, you will see that there's actually a notch in the centerpiece. What this means is that when the cube is in mid-turn, if you put pressure on the edges the right way, they can come out very easily, just making the puzzle very unstable. Which is not fun because I don't think anyone really wants to have to worry about edges falling out while turning a cube. The other problem is that the core of this cube has no structural rigidity whatsoever. You'll see that I'm able to tilt it whichever way. It also means that once you fully assemble this cube, it's basically impossible to assemble it. Like, to assemble this cube, you have to start with already a partially assembled one. I even tried designing special parts that have kind of their own anti-popping mechanism, but even that didn't work because the core is just too weak and pieces still fell out. So I'm going to conclude that the Cube Labs 10mm 3x3 is unusable for substantial extension mods such as this. If you want to make like a tiny extension mod, maybe just very slightly bigger than the base cube, I'm sure it would handle that just fine. But for more advanced stuff like this, don't waste your time. That being said, for my first iteration of this build, I actually did fully sticker it, and I got through most of a solve before it completely fell apart. And you know what? I actually kind of enjoyed it. So rather than giving up on this project, I chose to rebuild it using a 30mm 3x3. Now what that means is this puzzle is way too big. But at the same time, it's just a way for me to show you how this cube looks and solves without having to deal with this mess and without having to design a fully 3D printed tiny 3x3 mechanism. So this is the version that I'll be taking outside to see how it scrambles and solves. The Moyu 30mm 3x3 is a very good turning Rubik's Cube, and accordingly, this version of the mod turns much better than the old one, considering the fact that it actually works and doesn't fall apart in the middle of a solve. However, the fact that I'm adding so much material to a relatively small cube is not lost in the turning, and as evidenced by the fact that sometimes moves can catch a little just because it's easy to leave something misaligned. It also doesn't help that the circle parts, when oriented in a certain way, can also be a bit difficult to turn. So overall, this might not be the best turning 3x3 shape mod, but as I said before, I wanted to make it just to show how interesting the solve actually was, at least in my opinion. Of course, the cube is too big, and it would be lovely to have the same exact puzzle in a 57 by 57 by 19mm footprint, but at the moment I just don't want to spend even more time rebuilding this puzzle, so this is what we'll have to look at. It's interesting to me that this puzzle kind of clarifies why the Super Floppy Cube is able to shapeshift. The Super Floppy Cube, if you don't really think about its geometry too much, it's kind of actually intriguing. Why can it shapeshift? Like, it doesn't seem legal. But anyway, let's scramble the ultimate floppy cube and then solve it. Because this cube has centers and edges that vary greatly in size, you actually get a different solving experience depending on what you consider to be your first layer. So I'm actually going to do 2 layer by layer solves just to show you how this puzzle is actually surprisingly dynamic and honestly more fun than you'd expect for just a simple 3x3 shape mod. So first of all, I'm going to do the easier version, which is where the little circle is the first layer, the outer pieces are the second layer, and the yellow circle is the third layer. And then afterwards I'll solve it basically kind of like sideways. So let's get right into it. And here we are, the first layer is complete. You will see that obviously this piece is equivalent to this piece and this piece is equivalent to this piece, so there's a lot less permutations you have to do. Now I guess let's work on these centers, which I should probably have done already but I forgot about, and then we'll just do the second layer. Alright, and now all that's left is the last layer, which, as you can see, is going to be easier because of the fact that a lot of the pieces are simply equivalent. Alright, and the ultimate floppy cube is now solved using layer by layer with this as the first layer. So now I will re-scramble it, and then we will try solving it by using this as the first layer, which I think will be a more interesting solve. Alright, the ultimate floppy cube is once again scrambled, so let's try solving it layer by layer with the other first layer. And here we are, the first layer is complete. You can see that it consists of these 3 large pieces, these 3 small ones, and these 3 small ones. Overall, the puzzle still looks quite interesting, and really this top part looks quite messed up, even though that I've already completed a third of the puzzle. But anyway, now I'll get to the second layer. And here we are, just the last layer left to complete. Overall, should be quite interesting. Let's get to it. And so you can see here, I actually have a flipped centerpiece. Or, well, it's technically a edge visually, but it's really a 3x3 center. And that's because a lot of these pieces are equivalent, so I assume that all I have to do is swap around 2 edges or 2 corners, and then this will be all solved. So I'll quickly do that and then wrap up with this puzzle. And here we are. The ultimate floppy cube is finally solved. Honestly, this version of the solve was a lot more interesting than the other one. And I actually got kind of like mentally frozen during the edge permutation and edge orientation stages. I was really confused as to what I was looking at. And then obviously you can get parodies that you wouldn't get on a normal 3x3 due to all of the piece equivalencies. It's a shame that it's kind of cumbersome to move around due to the fact that all the parts are so big, but I think the fact that the solve is really fun outweighs that, and it's definitely worth it. This was a very fun puzzle to solve. Thank you all very much for watching, and have a great day.